Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajagacharya Stotara Satashi Srimad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajagacharya Stotara Satashi Srimad, Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 9th chapter, 27th verse, is that correct? Dana, Dharman, Raja Dharman, Moksha, Dharman, Vibhagashaha, Sri Dharman, Bhagavad Dharman, by divisions. Acts of charity, the pragmatic activities of a king, and activities for salvation. Then he described the duties of women and devotees, both briefly and extensively. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. To give charity is one of the householder's main functions, and he should be prepared to give in charity at least 50% of his hard-earned money. A brahmachari, or student, should perform sacrifices. A householder should give charity, and a person in the retired life, or in the renounced order, should practice penances and austerities. Those are the general functions of all ashrams, or orders of life on the path of salvation, of self-realization. In the brahmachari life, the training is sufficiently imparted so that one may understand that the world as property belongs to the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead. No one, therefore, can claim to be the proprietor of anything in the world. Therefore, in the life of a householder, which is a sort of license for sex enjoyment, one must give in charity for the service of the Lord. Everyone's energy is generated or borrowed from the reservoir of energy of the Lord. Therefore, the resultant actions of such energy must be given to the Lord in the shape of transcendental loving service for Him. As the rivers draw water from the sea through the clouds and again go down to the sea, similarly our energy is borrowed from the Supreme Lord. The Lord's energy is borrowed from the Supreme Source, the Lord's energy, and it must return to the Lord. That is the perfection of our energy. The Lord, therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita 9:27, says that whatever we do, whatever we undergo as penance, whatever we sacrifice, whatever we eat, or whatever we give in charity, must be offered to Him, the Lord. That is the way of utilizing our borrowed energy. When our energy is utilized in that way, our energy is purified from the contamination of material inebrieties, and thus we become fit for original natural life of service to the Lord. Rajadharma is a great science, unlike modern diplomacy for political supremacy. The kings were trained systematically to become munificent and not merely be tax collectors. They were trained to perform different sacrifices only for the prosperity of the subjects. I'll read that again. They were trained to perform different sacrifices only for the prosperity of the subjects. To lead the prajas to the attainment of salvation was the great duty of the king. The father, the spiritual master, and the king are not to become irresponsible in the matter of leading their subjects to the paths of ultimate liberation from birth, death, diseases, and old age. When these primary duties are properly discharged, there is no need of government of the people by the people. In modern days, the people in general occupy the administration by the strength of manipulated votes, but they are never trained in the primary duties of the king, and that is also not possible for everyone. Under the circumstances, the trained administrators play havoc to make the subjects happy in all respects. On the other hand, these untrained administrators gradually become rogues and thieves and increase the taxation to finance a top-heavy administration that is useless for all purposes. Actually, the qualified Brahmins are meant to give direction to the kings for proper administration in terms of the scriptures like the Manu Samhita and Dharma Shastras of Parashara. A typical king is the ideal of the general people in general. And if the king is pious, religious, chivalrous, and munificent, the citizens generally follow him. Such a king is not a lazy, sensuous person living at the cost of the subjects, but alert always to kill thieves and dacoits. The pious kings were not merciful to dacoits and thieves in the name of nonsensical ahimsa, nonviolence. The thieves and dacoits were punished in an exemplary way so that in the future no one would dare commit such nuisances in an organized form. Such thieves and dacoits were never meant for administration as they are now. The taxation law was simple. There was no force, no encroachment. The king had a right to take 1/4 of the production made by the subjects. The king had a right to claim 1/4 of one's allotted wealth. One would never grudge parting with it, because due to the pious king and religious harmony, there was enough natural wealth, namely grains, fruits, flowers, silk, cotton, milk, jewels, minerals, etc., and therefore no one was materially unhappy. The citizens were rich in agriculture and animal husbandry, and therefore they had enough grains, fruits, and milk without any artificial needs of soaps and toilets, cinemas and bars. The king had to see that the reserved energy of humanity was properly utilized. Human energy is meant not exactly for fulfilling animal propensities, but for self-realization. The whole government was specifically designed to fulfill this particular purpose. As such, the king had to select properly the cabinet ministers, but not on the strength of voting background. The ministers, the military commanders, and even the ordinary soldiers were all selected by personal qualification, and the king had to supervise them properly before they were appointed to their respective posts. The king was especially vigilant to see that the tapasvis, or persons who sacrificed everything for disseminating spiritual knowledge, were never disregarded. And in italics, the next sentence reads, "The king knew well that the Supreme Personality of Godhead never tolerates any insult to his unalloyed devotees." End of italics. I'll read that again. The king knew well that the Supreme Personality of Godhead never tolerates any insult to his unalloyed devotees. Such tapasvis were trusted leaders even of the rogues and thieves, who would never disobey the orders of the tapasvis. The king would give special protection to illiterates, the helpless, and the widows of the state. Defense measures were arranged previous to any attack by the enemies. The taxing process was easy, and it was not meant for squandering, but was for strengthening the reserve fund. The soldiers were recruited from all parts of the world, and they were trained for special duties. As far as salvation is concerned, one has to conquer the principles of lust, anger, unlawful desires, avarice, and bewilderment. To get freedom from anger, one should learn how to forgive. To be free from unlawful desires, one should not make plans. By spiritual culture, one is able to conquer sleep. By tolerance only can one conquer desires and avarice. Disturbances from various diseases can be avoided by regulated diets. By self-control, one can be free from false hopes, and money can be saved by avoiding undesirable association. By practice of yoga, one can control hunger and worldliness and worldliness can be avoided by culturing the knowledge of impermanence. Dizziness can be conquered by rising up, and false arguments can be conquered by factual ascertainment. Talkativeness can be avoided by gravity and silence, and by prowess one can avoid fearfulness, and by prowess one can avoid fearfulness. Perfect knowledge can be attained by self-cultivation. One must be free from lust, avarice, anger, dreaming, etc., to actually attain the path of salvation. As far as the women class are concerned, they are accepted as a power of inspiration for men. As such, women are more powerful than men. Mighty Julius Caesar was controlled by a Cleopatra. Such powerful women are controlled by shyness. Therefore, shyness is important for women. Once this control valve is loosened, women can create havoc in society by adultery. Adultery means production of unwanted children known as Varna Sankara, who disturb the world. The last item taught by Bhishma Dev was the process of pleasing the Lord. We are all eternal servants of the Lord, and when we forget this essential part of our nature, we are put into material conditions of life. The simple process of pleasing the Lord, for the householders especially, is to install the deity of the Lord in the home. By concentrating on the deity, one may progressively go on with the daily routine work. Worshipping the deity at home, serving the devotee, hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam, residing in a holy place, and chanting the holy name of the Lord are all inexpensive items by which one can please the Lord. Thus the subject matter was explained by the grandfather to his grandchildren. The verse again. He then explained by divisions acts of charity, the pragmatic activities of a king, and activities for salvation. Then he described the duties of women and devotees, both briefly and extensively. Om Agyanati Manadasya Gananjana Salakaya Chaksuvinmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaivam Narotaram Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudira Nasaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamashlokir Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Many came to hear Bhishma Dev at his deathbed. By some accounts he spoke for 2 months, in other accounts 3 months. So it was a fairly lengthy dissertation. It's interesting that Krishna himself was there for the entire speech. Probably in one lecture, and it's written in Nectar of Devotion and in various other shastras, that the devotee of the Lord is sometimes more important than the Lord himself. When Lord Chaitanya was having a discussion with Ramananda Roy, he asked Ramananda Roy many questions, as if he were the student and Ramananda Roy were the guru or the teacher. Ramananda Roy spoke very high philosophy. It's also stated in the Adi Purana that the one who characterizes oneself as the devotee of Krishna is not actually the devotee of Krishna. Yame Bhakta Janaparta. One who is the devotee of Krishna's devotee is actually a devotee. So in a sense, the devotee is more important than Krishna. This was exemplified by the Lord himself, Lord Krishna, who had a spiritual master, Lord Chaitanya, who had a spiritual master. They gave the example that the devotee is sometimes more important than Krishna himself. Therefore, one has to always respect and honor devotees as a first principle. In some religious traditions, people feel that their teacher is no longer living. But according to Shastra, and according to various texts that we find in the Srimad Bhagavatam and various other places, living devotees are very important. It is said in Chaitanya Chaitamrita, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Saja Kabunai Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Karye Udai, that the Krishna consciousness is part of everyone's natural psyche. The example that this is true was sometimes given in lectures by Srila Prabhupada, that he came to a place where people had never heard the name of Krishna. They had never heard the word Krishna. They never heard of the Vedas or anything of Shastric knowledge. And yet, somehow or other, by Krishna's mercy, they took to Krishna consciousness more than people of other parts of the world who think that they know all these things. When I was in England, there was a file called They Know These Things, because there are many people, I think there are, from a certain point of view, not numbers, but proportionate numbers, that there are more people from India living in England than in India and Pakistan. Not in numbers, but proportionally. There's a very large number. So at Sevenbury Place in London, there was a file called They Know These Things, because it was found that when anyone gave a lecture, preached to people from that part of the world, it was a common thing to hear someone from the audience say, "I already know this. We know these things." Although it's a very commonplace thing in certain, especially in around Mumbai and Delhi, when there's a Sankirtan party, that many people come, large numbers of people come to hear and stay for the whole kirtan. Sometimes hundreds of people come. Which is good. The downside is that many people in that part of the world think that chanting is just a step. They think that the real ultimate goal is to merge, and that the Supreme has no personality. They think that chanting is a useful step, but because they're unused to a personal relationship with Krishna, they don't think it's just a stepping stone. They very often and usually fall down vimukta manina because they don't have a personal relationship. When I was at Bhaktivedanta Manor, Prabhupada came in a helicopter from the Heathrow airport. He gave an address to the people when he landed finally. It was a very strange situation because it was kind of drizzly and rainy that day. And the pilot of the helicopter was waving for the devotees to get out of the way so that he could land. And they thought he was just waving to them, just saying hello. So they congregated right below the helicopter. Anyway, Prabhupada gave his arrival address. In his arrival address, he said that all the time he was thinking, when am I going to get down? And he was comparing that mentality to that of the impersonalists, who often think that they've arrived. But they come back to the material world and they say Jagat Mitya, that means the world is nothingness. Brahma Satya Jagat Mitya is the phrase that they use, that the world is nothingness. This is akin to certain philosophies that are opposed to Vaishnava philosophies. They are that the world is nothing. It's just an imagination. It's just a dream. Unfortunately, they come back very often from impersonal realization to the world that they said was unreal. The Vaishnavas, on the other hand, say that it's not unreal. It's just a temporary manifestation that we have to go through. When I was about 13 or 14 years old, we had to read a textbook, and in that textbook there was a picture of two people. One was a man of about 35, dressed in a business suit and tie, and having a very sort of neutral expression, kind of a friendly expression on his face. And next to him was a picture of an elderly man with a white beard, maybe about 70 years old. He had white, long hair and a white beard, and he wasn't dressed particularly fashionably so. And we were supposed to think that we would rather listen to the talk given by the younger person because of his look. So at that early age, I realized that I was being, and all of us were being, manipulated. We were being manipulated to think that we had to adhere to fashionable dress codes in order to be respected and listened to. That started at an early age, and that continued on anyway. I won't go into it, but it continued on up until old age. With Bhishma, on the other hand, although he was elderly, and although he was in a very awkward position in the last days of his life, he was listened to very carefully, not only by Krishna himself, but by the host of demigods and other people that were present. All the Pandavas were there and other people to get the words of wisdom. Sometimes it's said that wisdom comes from an unlikely place. I think Prabhupada once quoted the verse, it's in one of the Puranas or somewhere in textual writings, that we should take nectar from a pot of poison, gold from a filthy place, a wife from an obscure family, and so on and so on. One of the things is to take lessons from an untouchable. That is sort of like wisdom from a fool. When we were younger, we heard the story, I don't know if you've heard it, about the emperor's new clothes. You know that story? Anyway, one day the emperor, the parable goes, was on procession completely naked. And all the subjects were thinking, oh, because they were told that he's wearing his new clothes, he's going to parade in front of us. And they were thinking, oh, very wonderful. And everyone was applauding and thinking that they're wonderful. But a young child, who was maybe only 6 or 7, said something that brought the citizens, the subjects, to their senses, to realize that actually he wasn't dressed at all. So sometimes from unlikely places, wisdom can come. Prabhupada was fond of quoting Chanakya Pandit. It's interesting that Chanakya wasn't even a Vaishnava. At least he had Shaivite tilak on his forehead, these 3 marks in a horizontal fashion. He quoted him extensively. And there's even devotees have read books by Chanakya Pandit, Brita Chanakya, all the morals of life. And Prabhupada very often would quote things that Chanakya Pandit said. He lived in about 500 AD and was very much a nationalist, and there's even streets named after him. In Delhi there's a section called Chanakya Puri, the city or the district of Chanakya. So he became very famous as a nationalist. One of the reasons that he's so often referred to and quoted, although he was not a Vaishnava, was that he was an educationist. He had his own school. At a young age, he formed a school and he taught moral instructions, and they're very good instructions. And he taught politics and a lot of things that aren't necessarily true in according to Vaishnava behavior, but necessarily very important. Therefore, they were quoted a lot. So sometimes devotees manifest all these qualities. Actually, they manifest them all automatically. There's a verse in the Bhagavatam that we've often heard quoted by Indradyumna and others, Yasyati bhaktir bhagavatya kinchana, that devotees have all good qualities. It's a very common thing that people are nowadays active in terms of vegetarianism, animal rights, and various other movements. They're trying to better the quality of life of human beings through these various movements. But an interesting fact is that if one is a devotee of Krishna, one automatically has good qualities. The devotee doesn't like to harm even very small creatures, insects, not even ants. That's the perfection of animal rights. The hypocrisy of activists is that people sometimes who are it's been noticed that are advocates of animal rights are meat eaters. They purchase the flesh of dead animals. So being a devotee is good in all respects. Being a devotee transcends all of the so-called movements. They're not that they're bad, there's nothing wrong with them, but they usually have a limited period of devotion. They come and then they go, and they come and they go. Bhishma was very very wise. So even though he looked very old and he was in a very awkward position, he imparted a lot of wisdom. The wisdom he imparted was that we can learn from elders, from their wisdom, from their experience, things that we don't know. There was a slogan for one of the airlines that said, "You can't beat the experience." I think that particular airline is no longer existing, but it was a good slogan because it's true that you can't beat the experience. Bhishma is regarded, very highly regarded, one of the 12 authorities or Mahajans, Pralado, Janaka, Bhishma. He's cited as one of the 12 authorities, and therefore he wasn't an ordinary person when he was dying. And he had the benediction that he got from his father that he could die whenever he wanted to, which is a great thing. Most people think that that's a very wonderful thing. They think if I could live and live forever and only die when I wanted to die, that would be a great benediction. When I was younger, about 30 years ago, I read an article that was in some magazine that was part of the current of the world called Newsweek. And this article talked about replacement of all the organs in the body. the hand, the heart, and ultimately the brain. He said, well, maybe if the article went on to say, well, maybe this would be possible. Maybe someone could live for 200 years, 300 years, 400 years, but they would be robots because their memory could never be replaced. Anyway, it was kind of an interesting thing. So I'll probably stop here and see if there's any questions. Speaking of words of wisdom from a fool, I'll try to answer the questions. I'll play the part of a wise man. Yes?
If a household is a devotee or a brahmana and they're collecting money on behalf of Krishna, do they still have, does it still have to give charity or what?
Well, Prabhupada writes, and his exact words are, a brahmachari or a student should perform sacrifices, and a householder should give charity, and a person should give charity. I'm trying to find the thing about 50%. Anyway, he says at least 50%, which means that it's not a hard and fast rule that you have to give 50% of everything you earn, even if you're earning and giving money to Krishna, and you're supporting your family with your. I know that's a bit of a controversial item or topic, but it so happens that 50% has been written as a kind of possibility. It's not a hard and fast rule that you must do it. Maybe it was possible in previous times, but it's not necessarily possible at all times, in all places. So I don't know if that's helpful. But anyway, I think giving any part of your hard-earned money to advance the Krishna consciousness movement is a good thing. That's my personal opinion. Shanti?
Can be described as 50% of your net?
Well, it can be described in a lot of ways. The 50% can be 1%. It can be 0%. Because some people are giving every penny, 100%, to Krishna. So it's a kind of a controversial topic. I mean, it's been interpreted as net, gross, and 50%, 75%, 25%, 10%, 5%. There's different opinions about what that actually means. So we really have to look at the whole picture, not just take one thing that was said once as being always true at all times and all places. That's what I think, anyway. From a person who's not a householder, that's the perspective I have. Any other comments or questions?